Yes, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. I'm Jacob Turner. He's Andrew Jones, and AJ, we're here for another episode of This Week in the ACC, the Week 7 edition of this show, which we started for the first time a little bit earlier this season. So some good matchups this weekend, which we're going to dive into as we always do. Not a ton. We typically have a good amount of games to kind of go through. Not as many this week, especially with one of them being North Carolina, which we've already talked about in the UNC football show. But AJ, before we dive into it, I got a couple housekeeping items I want to mention. One of them is very, very exciting, is we are currently running a promo on TarHeelIllustrated.com. Links in the description below, along with all this other information I'm about to list right now, and you can get 50% off. Again, that's 50% off an annual subscription when you use the promo code HEELS23. Now, guys, that offer is valid through Friday at noon. So October 13th at noon, Friday the 13th, this promo will end. But so you do have a couple days to take advantage, but make sure you guys do take advantage. And real quickly too, AJ, this might be even more exciting of a part of this promo, which I think people will really like. We're also going to give away 3 free tickets to the Miami game this weekend in Kenan Stadium. 3 free tickets to any new subscriber who signs up using this promo code HEELS23. Hey, AJ, I don't know about promos. We've done some promos in the past. This one might take the cake, man. That's a heck of a deal right there. And again, you might have a chance to win 3 free tickets as well. So pretty cool.
It is. 50% off is great because I'm doing the math in my head. That means it works out to about $4.16 a month. That's
not even a beer, AJ. It's like not even buying us a beer anymore. I used to say, think of it like buying us a beer. It's not even a beer. That's not even a beer.
Like a Modelo in Kenan Stadium's like $11-12, right?
At least, yeah.
So it's
insane.
You get 3 months of THI for the price of a dead gum Modelo, but the tickets that's you more than make your money back on that right there.
100%.
So
yeah,
we're really excited. It's a flash sale. It's going to happen now. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Very short lived. We think a lot of people are very excited about the football team right now and basketball happening, and we've got so much stuff. And the thing is, we only give a little bit of our intel on these podcasts because we write a ton more than we talk. And there's a lot of stuff on the message boards that only go on the message boards. I have a intel thread for football that I'm constantly updating things that you'll never, ever get in any of these platforms anywhere, in these free platforms. Nobody has that information. There's a couple of us outlets that cover UNC that will have similar type information. We put ours on that thread. And also I had an Elliot Cadeau note on the basketball board that I only put on the board. You can only access it there. So in addition, you also get a great place to hang out with like Carolina fans. One of the things when I describe to people who ask me, well, what are your boards like? I said, well, do you have that Carolina friend, coworker, and he wants to talk Carolina on Monday or the day after a basketball game, but he doesn't really know a whole lot? He likes the team. He's a game fan, but he's not a program fan. He's not a 365 fan. The boards are 365 fans. These are people that care deeply about the backup guard in football. They're the people that are talking about how Cormac Ryan's going to be used in the middle of June, in the middle of July. And it's thoughtful dialogue. So that dude at the water cooler that asks you, hey, how's that Cadeau guy looking? And is there anybody else came in with him? No, none of those guys exist on our premium message board.
No,
so you can get passionate Carolina fans that are knowledgeable just like you, and it's a community to hang out in, and you'll be hanging out with people that will uplift you with respect to the Tar Heels. Every once in a while there's some spats, but they're pretty respectful in this, and we also dive in there and kind of squash it before it gets too ugly. So
yeah,
it's all part of the message board psyche.
Yeah, we got a really good community over there. For sure. So
we will announce the winner. We will announce the winner Friday afternoon.
Okay.
So
Friday
it's
afternoon.
It's a flash sale, flash promo, ends noon Friday. Sometime maybe a couple hours later, we're going to wait. We're going to have a list of all the new subscribers, and we're going to randomly choose. I actually may have my daughter do it.
I like that.
She's 14 years old. She doesn't give a rat's you know what about any of this stuff, but I'll make her care for about 3 minutes and have her spin around and just point to a name, and then that'll be the person that wins 3 tickets to the Miami game.
I love it. I love it, guys. Make sure you take advantage. Heels23 is the promo code. Links in the description below. Again, ends at Friday at noon, Friday the 13th at noon. Make sure you guys take advantage before that. But yeah, really awesome opportunity. You might win some free tickets to the Miami game as well. And last thing too, AJ, this show is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. We'll talk about them a little bit later on in the show, so stay tuned for that one. But let's go ahead and dive into this week's matchups. There's only 6 games, only 5 if you're not including North Carolina. So I'm going to split it up just between 3 and 2, just for continuity purposes, so we don't just list all 5 and then start talking about random games. So we'll start with the first 3. Syracuse at number 4, Florida State is the first matchup of the weekend. Florida State currently a 17-point favorite going in to that one. I thought that was a little bit high, but again, Syracuse after the blowout loss to North Carolina this week, not a lot of great wins on their resume this year either. I can kind of understand it. And obviously going into a 4th-ranked FSU is going to be a tough matchup. Next up is Wake Forest at Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech currently 1.5-point favorites going into that one, which surprised me just a little bit. With the new quarterback, seems like there's maybe a little bit of new life in that program. I know they're coming off a tough loss to Florida State last weekend, but they weren't expected to win that one anyway. So that'll be an interesting matchup for the Demon Deacons in Plattsburgh. And then the last matchup, at least in this slate right here, we've got number 14 Louisville at Pittsburgh. Louisville currently a 7.5-point favorite going into that one and coming off a big win over Notre Dame. Going to Pittsburgh, that's an interesting matchup to keep an eye on as well. Could potentially be a little bit of a trap game, but Pitt is not great this year. So I think a lot of people are expecting Louisville to win that one. But AJ, thoughts on those first 3 matchups, all conference matchups this week, I should mention as well.
Well, Syracuse and Florida State, I've said this for a while now. It's the ACC did Syracuse a huge disservice by having them not only play all 3, Clemson, Carolina, and Florida State, but play them in a row.
Yeah.
And then the last 2 on the road. Louisville doesn't play any of the 3.
Mm-hmm.
They had to know that these would be 3 of the best teams. There's no equity in the scheduling there, so it just doesn't make any sense. I would be surprised if Syracuse hangs in this game. They've got to. They would be well served if they had UVA coming to town or something like that this weekend.
Yeah, it is a tough gauntlet they got. I do feel for him in that respect.
For me, this game will be about watching what FSU is, how dialed in is FSU, how long do they stay dialed in. They had a big early lead on Virginia Tech, and the Hokies got back in it last week.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
FSU hasn't been, beginning to end awesome for a while, so we'll see what they're like there. Wake Forest at Virginia Tech. Wake Forest has not been as good as people thought this year. I don't think Mitch Griffiths is yet the player that they were hoping he would be at quarterback. They had to struggle at ODU. They've had a couple tough losses. Losing at home to Georgia Tech was bizarre because Georgia Tech bookended that game with a terrible 4th quarter at Ole Miss and then a home loss to Bowling Green when they gave up 40-something points. Bad. Or I can't remember how many points they gave up in that one. Almost 40 points around there. So I don't think Wake's that good. And that's dangerous going up there. I don't think Virginia Tech's that good either, but I would say that to me is a toss-up game. Whichever team gets better quarterback play probably wins that game. And then the other one is Louisville at Pitt. I mean, if Pitt had average quarterback play, I would say that Pitt could upset the Cardinals, but I think Louisville's going to win. The maturity in that program will be tested this week to see how they handle coming off the win over Notre Dame and the way they beat them and then having to go on the road. So there probably won't be a great crowd there. There rarely ever is. Won't be a great atmosphere. Is that a day game or a night game? That's a day game. I
need to double check. I believe it's a 3:30 matchup.
Because the ACC network game at night's Duke and State and then Carolina's ABC. That'll be an earlier game. I think Louisville wins that game.
6:30 p.m. 6:30 p.m. kickoff. Excuse me.
Oh, is that a CW?
It must be. It's obviously not on the ACC network. I don't see the TV coverage right now, but if I can find it in the next few minutes, I will.
Next week when Carolina hosts Virginia, we'll have a whole podcast about how to find the CW.
Yeah, I'm about to say, we're going to need it. I've already got people asking me, what is the CW? It is on the CW.
My dad asked.
It is on the CW, by the way.
Okay.
But yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, you get the James Bates game. So, this is great. James Bates is always happy. He loves everywhere he goes to cover a game. You got to appreciate that.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, I don't see Louisville losing a game, but they should be on alert, because if Pitt gets any kind of production from the quarterback position, then Pitt defensively, I think, might be able to slow Louisville some. But I expect Louisville to win that game. And the league needs Louisville and FSU to win. I've had some Carolina fans say to me, "Oh, you got to root against them." No, root for them. Mm-hmm. Because if Carolina runs through the season and ends up in the ACC title game, they're better off playing an unbeaten Louisville or an unbeaten FSU in the title game if it comes down to getting a CFP bid. You want to accumulate as many good wins as possible to enhance your resume. So Carolina fans should root for FSU and Louisville. I know they hate when I tell them what to do, but they should root for FSU and Louisville to go unbeaten. And quite frankly, I love chaos. Yeah, I want to see 3 12-0 ACC teams just for the simple fact of chaos. I'm not rooting for anybody, but I want to see the chaos. So if all three go 12-0, what a hell of a story that will be. And I want to see video of Jim Phillips picking names randomly out of a hat. That would be mint stuff, because it would be fitting, quite frankly. We should have Brett Friedlander on to tell us how fitting it would be. He would nail it.
Oh, he would love it. He would absolutely love it.
Like a Madison home run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah, it is weird that, Louisville could theoretically go undefeated this year and having not played, 3 of the best teams in the conference. That just oversight. I don't know. I mean, I get the scheduling's changed, but still it's.
Well, here, the thing is that if Miami loses to Carolina this weekend and then they lose to Clemson the following weekend, they'll drop out of the rankings. They won't be ranked when Louisville plays them. Yeah. We'll see what Duke is, especially without Ryan Leonard. Without Ryan Leonard, I don't think Duke is what obviously they are with him. So they could lose a game or two, and that no longer would be a ranked team for Miami. And after the way Kentucky played last weekend, it's possible that Kentucky's not ranked when Miami plays. And Miami could end up with no games versus ranked teams by the time they get to the end of November.
It's true.
Or not Miami, excuse me, Louisville, not Miami.
It's true.
So will Carolina? Maybe Carolina won't either. Who knows? But Florida State will, because I would imagine LSU is going to stay ranked. They're probably going to win enough to stay ranked. So
I would think so. I'd be shocked if they didn't. Yeah, no, for sure.
We'll talk 12-0 when we get to November if they're all.
Still a lot of football left to be played. No doubt about that. Yeah, man, just a ton, especially in college.
And a couple of programs that I probably wouldn't throw a ton of money on yet to do that.
Yeah,
and maybe all three. I'm not sure. Florida State. We've got to see more of Florida State.
I'm not 100% sold on Florida State. I think they're a good football team. I do. Yeah. Jordan Travis, really good. But I'm personally not 100% sold on them yet. But again, they keep winning. I mean, that's all you have to do. It's kind of like Carolina. Sure. I think Carolina has the potential to have a really good year. I'm not 100% sold on the fact that they will just win every game between now and the end of the year. Yeah. But they have the opportunity to do so if they continue to get better, which makes
what they're doing, since you brought it up, Carolina has a history of every once in a while getting, bumping their head on the ceiling and then they crash.
Yeah.
The history of the program says that, 8-0 in 97. Look at the early 80s. There were a couple teams like that. In Choo-Choo, they had a team that was ranked number 1 in the country one year and then they lose. So I think that we'll have to, that history will be tested at some point this year if they win this weekend. I think if they win this weekend, then they have a chance to maybe be 9-0 when Duke comes to town, maybe be 10-0 when they go to Death Valley, and that's when it will really be tested. So they have a chance to actually do something the program hasn't done, maybe break through that ceiling, but there's still a lot of football left to be played, and they have a lot of improving to do, just like Louisville does, and quite frankly, I think Florida State needs to get better as well.
Yeah, especially when you got to go to Atlanta. I know people are probably looking at me like, what are you talking about playing Georgia Tech at home? Not only are they a pesky opponent, but it is a program that for whatever reason, Carolina cannot beat over the past couple of years.
And they're better now.
And they're better. You can't overlook that game.
Brent Key is doing a good job. And you're seeing the growing pains where they're really good for stretches and then they drop for stretches.
Yeah.
They win at Wake and they lose to Bowling Green. That's part of the growing pains of what he's building there. But I think he's the right guy for that job. I think they're in good hands. And on a given week, they just won at Miami. Nobody thought they were competitive. It wasn't just they were handed a win, but they were in position to take advantage of a major mistake. So credit them for being in that position to win that game, and they did. So they're a better team than what people think, and Carolina's last 2 games against Georgia Tech have not been very good, and they usually don't do very well in Atlanta. So that's going to be a dangerous, dangerous game for the Tar Heels for sure.
Yeah, a lot of football left, man. We're going to keep saying that as the year goes on because, again, we're not even halfway through yet. So, AJ, before we talk about the last 2 matchups, one of which being Carolina, let me preface this. I can't count because I said earlier there was 6 games, 5 if you don't include Carolina. There's 5 games, 4 if you don't include Carolina. So apologies for my inability to count to 5. But we'll go ahead.
You were thinking non-conference, though, right? You were thinking
sure. There is a non-conference game we'll talk about, so that does play a factor. So appreciate you bailing me out right there, AJ. Because
I bailed you out big time, man.
Yeah, that was big time because I can't count, and I just proved to the whole world.
Point to the passer. Point to the passer.
I appreciate that, AJ. Appreciate that, man.
There you go.
Real quickly, AJ, before we go into the last couple of matchups in this one, do want to give a thank you to our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy, and we're extremely excited to be partnered with Underdog Fantasy. And we decided to partner with Underdog Fantasy because it's the easiest place to play fantasy sports, number one, but it's also the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. I know you can vouch for this, AJ. I can vouch for this because I can't go online or watch TV or drive down the road without seeing some kind of Underdog Fantasy ad nowadays. It's unbelievable. I thought at first I was like, well, maybe it's just because they're top of mind right now and they're sponsoring the pod. I'm noticing them more, but no. I see something about Underdog every single day of the week, and I think that shows you how big and upcoming they are as the fastest growing fantasy app in the game right now. And they have a ton to offer, including their Pick'em game. And in Pick'em, you choose whether your favorite players will have a higher or lower stat total in this week's game for a chance to win big. So maybe it's a Drake May, maybe it's a Tez Walker, and it's so easy to play. You just pick 2 to 5 stats of those favorite players and choose whether they'll go higher or lower, and you can even 20x your money by going 5, 4, 5. They also have a Best Ball Mania game. If you think you know football, you need to check this one out. This year's Best Ball Mania has $15 million in total prizes up for grabs, with the winner taking home $3 million. So sign up today with promo code HEEL, HEEL, to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. Visit underdogfantasy.com or find them in the App Store. Don't forget to register with that promo code HEEL. Links in the description below to head on over there. Must be 18 plus and present in the state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms do apply. If you're concerned with your play, call 1-800-522-4700 or visit ncpgambling.org. Big thank you to Underdog Fantasy for continuing to sponsor TarHeelIllustrated.com and all the podcasts we're doing over here on our YouTube channel. AJ, let's move on to the last couple of games on the slate. And it actually worked out pretty well because in terms of ACC matchups, you got 25th ranked Miami at number 12 UNC. Carolina currently going into that game 3.5 point favorites. And then the last game of the week, NC State at number 17 Duke. That's an intriguing one for me, AJ. Duke currently 3.5 point favorites coming off a bye week. And before that, a loss to Notre Dame at home. And then NC State coming off just a scraping one against Marshall. And that was a surprising game for me at home because we saw State's offense kind of figure it out, but they scored 40-plus points, but they only ended up winning the game by a touchdown. So the defense, for whatever reason, didn't play as well as they have played at points this year. So interesting to see where the Wolfpack are going into this one, but maybe they have kind of figured something out with MJ Morris finally taking on over there. So we'll talk about the other non-conference matchup here in a second after we talk about the NC State at Duke game. But I said it's fitting because we can actually hone in on this game a little bit, as we're obviously not going to talk about Miami and Carolina. We already did that in the UNC football show. But what are your thoughts on that matchup, AJ? Because to me, it's an interesting one.
I think it's cool that they're playing at night over there.
Mm-hmm.
That hadn't happened very often. State and Duke should play every year, so I'm glad they're playing. Should be a great atmosphere too. I mean, Duke has kind of rewritten their own script on atmospheres in football this year, and another big home game for the Blue Devils.
8 p.m. kick. That's the ACC network game. Is Carolina's on that?
That's the ACC network game. So the 15501 is going to have a lot of football traffic. So if you're heading to Chapel Hill, head there a little earlier because there's going to be a lot of traffic going in to those 2 games starting at night. So I'm looking forward to seeing what MJ Morris can do against Duke's defense. Duke is really good on defense, athletic, sideline to sideline, speed. They hit. Whenever Duke tackles, you see multiple helmets around the ball. And so that's going to be a test. MJ, he threw 3 picks, I think, the other day against Marshall. And Marshall's a pretty good club, too. Marshall's a pretty good team.
Yeah,
Marshall
they're a good football team. Beat Virginia Tech pretty handily at home this year,
Yeah, they might win the Sun Belt as well, which is a good league. So I think just getting a win, actually, if I'm an NC State fan, I'm a lot more pleased about the offense in that game than I am concerned about the defense in that game. I think the defense will show up. Peyton Wilson will see to it. He's a fanny smacker if there ever was one. So I think Duke wins this game. Even with some limitations, even without a Riley Leonard, I think Duke wins this game because Duke defensively is really sound, really solid, don't make mistakes, excellent in pre-snap, and MJ Morris is going to have a big task on his hands in this game. So I think Duke will win. I don't think it'll be very high scoring, maybe in the 24-20 range. Probably won't be any more high scoring than that. But it's going to be a good game, and I'm looking forward to seeing what that atmosphere is like. I'm going to tape the game and watch it Sunday or Monday, and I hope it's a great atmosphere. The more great atmospheres in the league, the better, especially right here in our own backyard.
Of course, yeah.
The more college football matters here, the better. So I think it's cool that it matters in Durham. It always matters in Raleigh, and it matters right now in Chapel Hill, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And yeah, again, Riley Leonard still day-to-day, even coming off that bye week after injuring his ankle in kind of the last play of the game against Notre Dame. So obviously a big factor in that game will be his status. Does he play? If he does play, how healthy is he? And that'll obviously be a big factor as NC State heads over to Durham for that late night matchup with the Blue Devils. AJ, non-conference games, we always kind of throw in Carolina's non-conference opponents and who they're playing. Minnesota has a bye week after just getting demolished by Michigan last week. We kind of expected that to happen. Didn't do Carolina's any favors in terms of maybe upsetting Michigan to help that win look a little bit better, but it wasn't to be. And then Appalachian State coming off a Tuesday night loss in Boone to Coastal Carolina. So again, no favors in Carolina's direction there. Coastal Carolina, a good program, maybe not as good as they've been the last couple of years, but App State has struggled a little bit since, especially in conference play, with some of their wins. Yeah, barely.
ULM. App State's lost 3 games late game.
I know.
I would imagine that Sean Clark is probably not getting a lot of love letters right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of. I've seen some stuff, on Twitter, and I obviously went to App, so I know some App fans, and there's a little bit of frustration with him, and I think a lot of people are kind of like, I don't think he's the guy to get this thing moving forward. And again, even they beat ULM, but on like a last second 50-yard kick, to win it. So they haven't really had any convincing wins in terms of conference games or playing, the P5 programs this year. So yeah, that's an interesting position for App State. No, they are not helping the Tar Heels.
Nobody is
whatsoever. No, nobody is, are they? See, South Carolina, even, who we're going to talk about in a second, because that is the only matchup this weekend in terms of Carolina's non-conference opponents is they host Florida in South Carolina. That's an intriguing one. If South Carolina can win that game, especially with it being at South Carolina, that could obviously help boost that win, Carolina's win over them in the opening game a little bit. But I think that's a matchup South Carolina could potentially win. I think that one's there for the taking. If it was at Florida in the Swamp, I'd be like, I don't know if they can go down there and get the win. But with it being a home game, I think there's potential there for South Carolina to pull that one off.
Well, let's look at it this way. South Carolina's 2-3. But the losses are Carolina and Charlotte. At Georgia, they hung in that one, and then they didn't have a great performance at Tennessee.
The SEC's an animal down there. Yeah, man, it's tough.
Carolina's 3 non-conference opponents that they've beaten. All 3 of their head coaches are being questioned pretty harshly by fans right now. I think PJ Fleck's in better shape, but people there went, okay, well, is this the best it can be here? So you know what happens when fans start thinking that? Schools start thinking they could be better than they are, and they get rid of guys like Steve Logan and Ruffin McNeil, and then they fall apart right after that, like East Carolina's learned. Often schools forget who they are, and they get rid of a guy thinking, well, we should be much more than this, and then they realize it takes forever to get back to where they were with the guy that they fired. So PJ's probably in good shape, but there's a lot of concern there, and there's a lot of criticism. Shane Beamer this week deflecting some of that stuff, state of the program questions about them at 2-3 in year 3 of him, which I think is silly. Let things play out. If they lose at home to Florida, I think it's a legitimate question to ask next week. If they take care of Florida, let this thing kind of see where it goes, since they've been above expectations the last 2 years. And we were just talking about Sean Clark. So we don't really know how good Carolina's schedule has been so far. I know that it's rated kind of high, but part of that's because they've just played a lot of P5s. And other teams have been playing some G5s and some FCSs, and they haven't played an FCS yet. So we'll know more about the Tar Heels as they go through the schedule. But it's conceivable that they don't have what might be considered in November a good win yet.
I know, so it is
Carolina fans. Yeah, Carolina fans should pull for South Carolina. You got to pull for South Carolina, man. Guys.
Yeah. You already beat them, really so do. I mean, can't say nothing about it.
And they get a win. Then South Carolina have 2 SEC wins because they have a win over Mississippi State. So
yeah, you definitely root for South Carolina. I know nobody's going to root for App State, but root for App State when it comes to kind of getting some more wins on their schedule, and root for Minnesota as well. I know Chris Collins, former North Carolina Tar Heel, he's playing over there. So if you need a little Carolina kind of connection there to root for a little bit.
The longer Carolina goes unbeaten, the more the App State question is going to come out. I was on Tuesday, I was on a show with the Miami site publisher, and he said, like, what happened in that game? So people are asking that now. And a lot of people don't really understand what App State is. They don't understand the dynamics of that game and how good the programs are. And they think most people call it Appalachian State. They don't even know how to pronounce it.
Oh, it's it. You do that in Boone.
Yeah, Marcus Benjamin, no doubt. Marcus Benjamin pronounced it properly. But if Carolina's sitting there at 10-0 going into Death Valley, people around the nation are going to say, but what happened in Appalachian State? How did that happen? They almost lost that game. So the Tar Heels need App State to get on the winning track now and win games. So at least they're not talking about a 4-5 team at that time or a 5-5 team. If it's a 7-3 team, that's going to look a little bit better and a little easier to explain. But the Mountaineers have not done the Tar Heels any favors. They didn't do it in Laramie, and they didn't do it Tuesday night.
No, they didn't. They had a great opportunity to beat Wyoming, too. Arguably should have won that game, but kind of gave that one away late, too. But, AJ, we're going to wrap this.
Wyoming could be the G5 rep in the New Year's 6.
What the heck did they beat last week? They beat somebody last week.
They beat Fresno State.
Yes, I think they've only got one loss on the year. So Wyoming, I think, creeping up and potentially, I don't know if they're a ranked team yet, but probably creeping up there if they keep winning.
The Wyoming Air Force game could determine who represents the G5 in the New Year's 6.
Yeah, it's a great point. It'd be interesting to keep an eye on that for sure. And I want to stay real quick. We're going to wrap this up in a second, but I want to stay on this App State game real quick, the Carolina game, because I think it's an interesting one. I want to just stay on it because I know obviously a lot of Carolina fans watch this one. And I feel like we see it around the country a lot. We see some of these teams, heck, even some of the best, top ranked teams going into the year struggle early on, or maybe barely win a game against a lesser opponent. And for me, it's interesting because you mentioned it, App State. We've talked about it countless times that there's no point in Carolina playing App State because of how good traditionally App State is as a football program, but also because of what the game means to App compared to what it means to North Carolina. And I've had this discussion as someone who got a degree from Appalachian State and understands it. And I know a lot of Carolina fans understand it just because of how the last 2 matchups have gone in Boone and in Cadence Stadium. For me, the App State game from an App State perspective is like their Super Bowl. It really is. And just to use that term, it is a massive game. It's their biggest game of the year, arguably, and it's early in their season as well. So it's not like they're playing them in November when both teams are kind of banged up and maybe App State's gone through the gauntlet. Confidence is low. It's early on in the year. App State confidence is high. You're going into North Carolina. You've already beat them in Chapel Hill a couple years ago, almost beat them and arguably should have beat them in Boone last year, went down to kind of the final play. And then Carolina goes into it. Probably in some ways, it's kind of hard to get up for that game a little bit. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but Carolina's rivals in football are NC State and Duke. That's the rivals right there. App State views this game as a massive rivalry game, and Carolina just doesn't, because besides when they play, every few, two programs that haven't played each other a lot in the last 20 years. But when they play, Carolina doesn't have App State circled on the schedule. I mean, App State does. And they have it circled on the schedule in the offseason as well. It means a lot more to that program than it does to North Carolina. So people in the state understand that, but it's the national media that you're talking about who don't quite get how good of a football dynasty App State's been for the last, I mean, honestly, 20, 30 years, when even going back to when they were in the FCS. Great program, a team that's always going to get up for the Carolina game, and it's opposite for the Tar Heels. So I just wanted to stick on that for a second, because I do understand that that's going to be a topic of conversation if App State keeps losing, and it's going to be a bad reflection on the Tar Heels, for lack of a better word. But the fact of the matter is Carolina won the game. That's a W on their on the schedule right now, and you can't take that away. But it would just be unfortunate for, maybe App State keeps losing, and, halfway through the, maybe Carolina's 8-9-0, something like that. And people are like, well, but they barely beat App State. It's like, if you don't understand it, then you can kind of just look at that in the wrong way, in my opinion.
Well, the only so-so practices that Carolina's had going back to the beginning of spring were the week of the App State game.
You think that was human nature, coming off kind of a game day, opening game?
Human nature.
Kind of
Human nature. Every time you look up, you don't see it, but it's there. Mm-hmm. Human nature follows all of us everywhere we go, and it absolutely follows a team of 19, 20, 21-year-olds. So that, and Max said, they weren't bad practices. They weren't great. They've been great practices otherwise. And then they beat them, and they fall 3 spots in the polls. So, yeah, I agree with you. They should never play again. We've talked about this before. It doesn't do them any good to play that game. And they should play ECU one more time, because they've lost 3 in a row to ECU. And
yeah, they should go ahead
each time.
And one time. Yeah,
they need to go ahead and just kind of end that and go play them there and do it. But who knows? I don't think there's anything to gain by playing those games. So,
yeah.
But Carolina fans need to root for all those teams. I think South Carolina will be a very interesting game this weekend. That actually probably might be a fun game to watch. It could be sometimes a game with lots of turnovers and mistakes are fun, and that might be that kind of game.
Oh, very well,
Columbia.
Yeah,
but it's a big game for Shane Beamer. It's a big game for that program, and it's also a big game for Florida too, because they got a lot of question marks there. So, what time is that game? Is that an early game? Do you know?
I was just trying to look that one up to see,
because I wouldn't mind. I'm not, if Florida State's whooping up on Syracuse and that's an early game, I wouldn't mind watching that game.
3:30.
3:30. Okay.
Florida State not ranked. I mean, Florida not ranked either. So, very winnable game for South Carolina.
I could probably watch. See, I'm not going to even watch the first quarter, because I'm going to try to get Chapel Hill early, because the traffic's going to be brutal.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's going to be tough.
So I get to watch the noon games, which is rare. So we have the night game stuff. And by the way, the night game factor, it'd be a different topic for a different day maybe, but see that the Virginia games at night, they're going to play at night pretty much the rest of the way.
Yeah, especially if they keep winning, man. There'd be a lot of
fans. I'm just curious. Do fans like the night game or like the 3:30 game better?
I'll vouch. I can speak on this real quick, because I was actually talking to some Carolina fans about this recently, and from a fan perspective, I tend to get the 3:30 is kind of like the best time, because it doesn't not ruin your whole day, but you can get there early and still tailgate plenty of time. You don't have to get there at the crack of dawn to do that. You can still get there, 10, 11 o'clock if you want to be out there for a few hours for the game. But, the game ends 7:30 at the latest, and you're back home and can watch some late night college football after that as well. So from what I hear, I think the 3:30 is the most desirable, because think about the 7:30 too. You're kind of sitting around the whole day, obviously tailgate in the afternoon, waiting for the game to happen. And then you're getting home at, 1 a.m. probably, so depending on where you live, could be even later than that. So 3:30 is what I typically hear from fans, but there's probably some fans
what you do for a living.
Yeah.
Or it depends.
For me, it's give me a noon game every day of the week, man. Every single day of the week. I'll take
from a media standpoint,
but them 7:30 games, man. I mean, you're talking 2 a.m., 3 a.m. before I even finish working. You don't stop working until 8 a.m. the next morning. So
I left Keenan after midnight.
Yeah.
Saturday after the Syracuse.
I believe it. I ended up getting home around, I think I finished working on Saturday about 10 o'clock, 10:15-ish after, by the time I got the video up. So, yeah, the 3:30s are still some late nights, but 7:30 national television, that there's going to be 7,400 TV timeouts as well. I mean, it's going to be a long one, but, fun game nonetheless.
I'd like to have one noon game this year.
Oh, I'd love a noon game.
We were all hoping.
But it probably won't. They'll probably have a night game for Campbell, because they can pick whenever they want to play because of the TV allocation.
Well, that'll probably be a CW game.
Yeah, that'll probably be a 6:30 or a 3:30. Carolina very well may not play a noon game this year. Very possible.
Well, we were all hoping UVA would be noon, and we found out right before the start of MAC on
6:30
Monday
is a
over at the
crappy
football
time.
center. It was 6:30 for UVA. Well, they'll probably have a better crowd for a 6:30 game against UVA than a noon game.
True.
Especially given the fact that UVA is horrid this year.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, 3:30. If you are watching still, let us know. Get involved on Twitter, message board, whatever. Let us know if you.
Hey, the three of you that are still watching this, let us know what you think.
Yeah, let us know what you guys think, man. We appreciate you guys sticking around.
Noon, 3:30, 6:30, or 7:30. We'll add in 6:30 because there's a lot of 6 and 6:30 starts out there.
I'm putting my money on 3:30, 6:30, 7:30, and then noon will be the last one. That would be my guess if you had to rank all four of those.
Mine would be noon. Noon.
You ain't the only one, AJ. There's nothing better. This is the last thing I'll say. If you think a noon college football game is great for a media, a noon basketball game is even better. There's nothing better than a noon basketball game in the Smith Center. You get up early, the game's over by 2:00. At least for me, I'm home by 4. You know what I mean? It doesn't get any better than that.
A noon basketball game in Smith Center. I'm walking out of the Dean Dome at 6.
That for you is spectacular. And go get a little dinner. Relax a little bit, maybe watch some late night basketball, just hang out with the family.
Absolutely.
It's nice. But
God, man, now you got me dreaming.
Yeah, I'm over here. AJ, you don't understand, man. Every Monday or whenever the heck they release the game times, I just am fingers crossed. Give me a noon game. Come on, give me a noon game. And it's never going to happen this year. So Carolina fans are loving it. It's strictly selfish. And so it's just strictly not wanting to get home after midnight.
Totally self-serving. Totally
100%. 100%.
Me.
And again, if I was a fan and I was going to these games, I'd be like, I don't want a noon game. Nope. Give me a 3:30, 7 o'clock and
it sucks if you're a fan.
Yeah. I just like it because you get up and you go. And I like that. You're in it. You're in as soon as you wake up, you're in it. You're in game mode. You're ready to roll. Even from a fan's perspective, I do kind of like that. But and it is nice to wrap up at 4 if you're a fan. Game's over by 3:30 and maybe go grab some dinner on Franklin Street, watch some college football. That to me it would be just a fantastic afternoon, but I know a lot of fans are going to disagree with me on that. But we'll go ahead and wrap this one up because there's probably nobody watching anymore anyway. So I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Make sure, if you are still watching, to take advantage of our promo we're running right now. 50% off your first year of an annual subscription. So you're getting 1 year for 50% off. Promo code HEELS23, and it ends Friday at noon, October 13th. We're also going to select one random new subscriber to get 3 free tickets to the Miami game this weekend. AJ, real quick, I didn't ask you this, but you're going to announce the winner on Friday. How are you just going to meet the fan at the gate to give him the tickets? How are you?
No, we can email them to them, actually.
Oh, yeah, true. They're all digital.
So it's all online. So, yeah, we can email them to them, and they'll just download it, and it'll be fine.
Forgot about that. I forgot that they're all digital. I'm old school when they used to have the physical tickets. No more. They don't see those anymore. So,
yeah, I like the physical tickets because I collect them.
Me too. I like them too. I used to have a bunch from when I used to go to games, growing up and stuff like that. But my
dad gave me 1947 Yankee ticket stubs.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow. 47. Yeah. Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, he took, his sister was like 12 years older. He took the train from Wilmington up to New York to go visit her for a week. And he went to Ebbets Field for a couple of games and then Yankee Stadium. Then he went to the Polo Grounds. They had 3 teams back then.
Man,
so I got ticket stubs from all that. He went to the 1961 AFL championship game. I think it was the Chargers and 49ers in San Francisco at old Keyser Stadium. I've got that. And I got a lot of cool stuff he got for me. And then I have some of my own stuff.
Yeah, I think your dad's lived about 10 different lives, as much stuff as he's done in his lifetime. So,
he's amazing. So I took a stub from him seeing the Tokyo Giants play in the 50s.
Tokyo Giants,
when he was over there with the Navy in the 50s.
That's amazing, man. We need to get your dad was on a podcast a couple years ago talking about Charlie Choo Choo Justice and the book he wrote. That's one of my favorite podcasts.
I had him on my radio show in Wilmington to talk about growing up there. And it's a great story. People here that are still listening, they'll find this interesting. 2 people now. We've lost the third one.
Yeah, he's gone.
He grew up in Wilmington and he was really good friends with Sonny Jurgensen. He was also friends with Meadowlark Lemon, the legendary Globetrotters player. Mm-hmm. And back then the black kids and the white kids would get together and they played baseball on Saturday mornings. And a lot of them didn't tell their parents about it. because parents wouldn't want them doing it, but different time, obviously. But great stories about that. So I had Meadowlark Lemon on my radio show one time, and I asked him about that. And he's like, oh, yeah. And he started telling all these stories about how the kids would get together on their own on a Saturday morning and play baseball.
That's awesome.
And it was just amazing stuff. I mean, I think of just a snapshot in time going back to that moment and wishing that it could have been captured in some kind of form. That would be such a cool thing to see. Mm-hmm. But just a video. I mean,
something like that.
It would be a great movie. I've told my dad, I said, you need to write that stuff. He's written 20 books. Mm-hmm. You need to write about that. Maybe, he's 89 now and he's looking for a woman. So that's consuming a lot of his time. I don't tell him to write that book. That'd be great.
Yeah, man. You definitely should. I mean,
Meadowlark passed a few years ago, but I still have the interview. I have a cassette of the interview that I did with him. So it's cool stuff, man.
Oh yeah. I love that kind of stuff, man. Your dad's very
Roman Gabriel too. Roman Gabriel is from that area. He's a couple years younger, but my dad and Sonny were good friends.
That's awesome.
They played on the 18th Street Commodores team together.
Your dad has quite the life. Like I said, he's done it's very, very interesting. And maybe one day we'll talk about it a little bit more, but it is wild. Like I said, I think he's lived.
Well, he wrote that World War II football book about what's fascinating. If you go look at rankings during World War II, the Bainbridge Naval Base was ranked number 2 in the country, and its star running back was Charlie Choo Choo Justice.
I know, yeah, it's wild.
Who was a college All-American before he got to Carolina. It was a totally different era back then. This is not the first time guys have played more than 4 years of college sports. They did it back in World War II as well. Mm-hmm. And he has a whole chapter in there about Choo Choo. So I did a lot of the research. I went to Camp Lejeune. They have old papers there with stories about Choo Choo Justice coming in there. And in fact, he had one run they described. It was a 60-yard touchdown run, and they described that he ran like 180 yards on the play. So it's such cool stuff. I've got it here in my office. I'm not pitching the book or anything like that, but it's a really, really neat book. So I actually did. He wrote a series of pieces for us about Choo Choo during the COVID year, since we were starving for content, and I had him on do a podcast too.
Yeah, do it again. One of my favorite pods that we've ever done. It's fascinating. I'm a big history World War II buff, so it was a great, awesome podcast. It's on our YouTube channel. If you search Charlie,
it was before we realized you could do the gallery on Zoom, so it just shows whoever.
Yeah, I have a bunch of images in there that I overlaid of books and some old images I was able to find of Charlie playing back then for Bainbridge. But definitely go check out that podcast. I think that one should have a lot more views than it ended up getting, because it's fascinating if you're a history guy like me. So go check that one out. Just search Tar Heel Illustrated Charlie Choo Choo Justice. You'll find it on there somewhere from a few years ago. So appreciate
cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate everybody watching as always. Big thank you to Underdog Fantasy. Promo code HEAL to get that first deposit up to $100. Links in the description. And we'll see you guys next week. Thanks.